Hi, welcome back to part 2 of Who Are You Really? Or How to Grow Yourself Up. Start my little timer. To be honest, that was motivated by my husband doing this in the background, so woohoo, thank you. So we were talking yesterday about how everyone's born with this core worth, this core value. Because of core hurts that get introduced, we often build a protective false self. And sometimes we forget that our core value self is there. So part of our job of recovery is recovering that connection to who you really are. Because without that connection, that false self, that reactive child self, is not good at handling the challenges of the adult world because it's not meant to. And this is where you get, addictions and bad relationships and dysfunctions of all kinds, and just this feeling of this is not real. Right? There's often that feeling of being an empty shell. And people often worry, like, what if you dig down deep and there's nothing there? Or what if you dig down deep and really, I'm a piece of crap? And the reality is, when you dig down deep, at your core is that part you were born with, that you don't have to earn value, worth, lovability, importance. That's your birthright. So it's reconnecting you with that. So we want to make the decision. If you want to change, you need to make the decision that I am going to, dig back down and reconnect with the real me and do the work that it takes. And it does take effort. This is not one of those, hey, you can change your life in 30 minutes and 5 easy steps. Let's be real. Most of you sitting there, haven't you already tried that? I can change your world in no time, and it's called cocaine or meth or heroin or any of those things. Or common addictions, it's called shopping, looking at your phone every time you're bored, addiction to gambling. It's all those behavioral addictions too. Something's going to fix it for me, and it's going to fix it quick. So we had talked about the 5 core self skills. We had started with number 1, building self-esteem and self-worth. Getting in touch with, knowing, and developing your self-worth. 1 is what a child needs to develop that, and then 2, what you need to do as an adult to develop that. So this is really working on developing the ability to hold yourself in warm regard. And we'll talk later in relationships about how that comes up, where you're also going to hold others in warm regard despite human imperfections, right? Because we all have human imperfections. We are human beings. So, and to do that on an equal playing field, to not go 1 up, better than, to not go 1 down, victim, less than. Don't go 1 up, don't go 1 down. Because the problem with 1 up and 1 down is those roles keep switching, right? Underdogs hate to be underdogs. They'll try to be the top dog. And then when they're the top dog, then this underdog tries to be the top. And it's just this constant battle of never feeling good enough, because there's no winning that game. The winning comes with 2 imperfect human beings, or more if you're in a family, but let's just talk the easiest one. 2 imperfect human beings standing on the same level and realizing that, hey, I have worth, you have worth. We may not see things from the same perspective, and we'll get to that, and we can negotiate through all this, because human relationships each human relationship comes with its own set of unsolvable problems. We will never see eye to eye on everything. But we're going to talk about how we build meaning and intimacy and those kinds of things. So to build your self-esteem that's not based on either being shamed, I'm not good enough, or grandiosity, you're not good enough, we're going to have this real sense of self-esteem. We went through a list of some of the false ways of doing self-esteem, which can be either falsely inflated, and you guys know I call that going full Kanye, I'm better than everybody, that arrogant stuff, which is really not that genuine self-esteem. Or the hierarchical kind, the 1 up, 1 down kind, where I can either compare myself to feel better about other people and put other people down so I feel better. So that's just a brief review of where we've been if they don't show these videos back to back. And here's a line I like too. When you think about self-esteem, the false kind of self-esteem, you are pushed by fear. And in fear and shame. And in genuine self-esteem, you are called by grace to something better. So do you want to be pushed by fear and shame? You're always running from fear and shame? Or do you want a kind of self-esteem that, hey, I can be called by grace for my higher purpose, my my meaning in my life, my dreams, my goals, what I want to accomplish here on this earth as a human being. And the other way of false self-esteem, hey, I may not think much of myself, but I think about me all the time. That's that weird paradox of some of the people who have the lowest self-esteem. They don't really feel good about themselves deep at the core, but they come across as really selfish people because they're always thinking about themselves, because they're stuck in that hurt spot. Hey, I don't feel good about myself, so I'm just going to constantly like, people trying to take what I have. It's a very scarcity-driven model. There's only so much to go around. I gotta get mine. So that drives part of that too. So I may not think much of myself, but I think about myself all the time. So step 2. So one was self-esteem. Step 2, self-awareness. Now, self-awareness, I didn't name these, so I'm using certain models, but self-awareness is knowing one's experience, meaning your thoughts, your emotions, and your sensations. And again, we talked about that a couple videos ago, that there, we have the thinking things, that we're constantly having this thought conversation in our head, and our thoughts absolutely influence how we behave, how we see the world, and how we're perceived by other people. Thoughts also greatly influence our feelings. I can think something about a situation, and then I start acting as if that's true, and then I get all these feelings that go with it, and it might not be true at all. So in class, I could see someone kind of, this has really happened in class, right? Someone who's been in class, they've been engaged, and they come in, and for a few classes, I'm like, they're falling asleep. They're practically, snoring in the class the whole bit, just very zoned out and disengaged. Now, I could take that thought and go like, oh my God, I'm a terrible teacher. This guy's like sleeping in my class. Obviously, I have nothing of value. Maybe I ought to do some other job. What can I do, right? Or I can think, well, that disrespectful little bastard, right? I can't believe he comes to my class and disrespects me by falling asleep. But I could come up with 10 other explanations for what might be going on. It might be he's in one of the really loud pods that stays up half the night and then sleeps most of the day. So it's like this guy hasn't gotten much sleep because he's a light sleeper. It could be, and this is often the case, they put him on some new meds and the guy is having a hard time staying awake because these meds really knock him out, right? Sometimes when they're trying to get bipolar under control or whatever, that will happen. So my thinking can absolutely affect my perceptions, the stories I tell myself about that, and then it can definitely affect my emotions. Okay, and emotions can do the other thing. You get a certain feeling, and you may then start making up thoughts about it, right? Sometimes we make up thoughts the other way, like we see someone and we get this like kind of love. It's not really love, it's a lust emotion, let's be real. Like they remind us of someone, or they look like a movie star or whatever, and then suddenly we have these thoughts about, I could have a perfect relationship with them. Why am I dealing with these mere humans over here? I have this person, this movie star type person. Baby, I could then I could be totally happy. So we can do either way with the thoughts and the emotions. And then sensations, remember we talked about different than emotions because it's the physical sensations in your body: hot, cold, numb, tingly, tight, loose. It's all those physical sensations that go on. So self-awareness, what parents do to help build this is they acknowledge the kids' sensations and feelings, and they start helping the kids learn to identify and label those emotions, and then they help them handle those emotions, because kids are often overwhelmed with their emotions. Remember, everyone starts with emotions as their first language. The baby cries, just something's going on, it's just rah, 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 and that's the only time in your life when actually that throwing a crying tantrum should work to get love and care and all that. After you're an infant and you're like, wah, 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 to get my way, really, people in the world, if we were being fair, should stop reinforcing that, because that's not the adult thing, that's the immature child. Once you're at a certain age, that's an immature child response to think that throwing a fit will get you your way. But what happens is with kids who are raised by, functional parents who know how to do it, they identify and help their kid learn that you can tolerate any feeling. They help their kid learn to be a thermostat and not a thermometer, right? Because a thermostat regulates the temperature. Hey, if I'm getting too hot, I'm going to learn ways to cool myself down. If I'm too cold, and that looks like depression stuff, I'm going to learn ways to rev me up. And parents will help kids walk through all those feelings. And not by telling the kid don't feel a certain way or do feel a certain way. It's by accepting the kid in all those feelings and using that skill of empathy, right? And empathy is a skill because what it is this desire to enter into the experience of another. So step one is you have to set aside judgment, right? I'm not going to judge the kid's feeling. You shouldn't feel that way. You should feel that way. What about when you do this to me? All those kinds of ways we get judgy about it. You know, if we can set the judgment aside and really pay attention and listen, remember, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So really listen with that attitude of openness and acceptance. Listen to what the kid's telling us, not just with their words, because words come later, but with every part of them, like their body language. It's estimated that 90 to 97% of what we get from other people is body language. And that's why that human connection is so important, because we pick up on all these subtle cues, and then only part of it's verbal. And if the verbal and the body language doesn't match, our bodies and our brains believe the nonverbals much more because they're much more telling. But their parents sit with their kids through all these emotions and don't just try to make them go away. So you set aside judgment, you really listen to what the kid's going on, and you listen for emotions, and then you actually put words to those emotions. That sounds like you're really frustrated. Oh my gosh, you feel really hurt because you were close to that friend and she ditched you, and feels like betrayal. You know, you label that, and then you listen as they do that, as they talk about that. Yeah, and you don't jump into, well, let me tell you about the time or here's what you need to do to fix it. You're really there walking with them through it, not trying to tell them to get over it, and not doing that closing the door that sympathy often does. When people ask the difference between sympathy and empathy, remember, sympathy often closes the door. Oh, that's just terrible, you poor thing. Well, you are so strong, you'll get through it. Boom. And you kind of exit the situation instead of like, wow, I'm hanging out here with you, you know. I hear how bad that, I cannot even imagine how that feels, losing your child. I don't know what I can do, but just I'm right here, right now. And then really be there, right then. And that's often the big thing that you need to do. And people often think, well, that doesn't really fix it. So the dysfunctions that come along if people don't do self-awareness, you either get people who dissociate, they get cut off from their feelings. They don't know what their feelings are, and they don't know what other people's feelings are, right? And then they're like, you know, I'm not into all these feeling things. Well, guess what? People who dissociate from their feelings are really susceptible to pick up addictions, because what do addictions do? They cover up feeling stuff. I don't have to feel. I have all these false ways of influencing feelings. I can make myself feel different by using an addiction, right? So dissociation or perfectionism is another way. When people are not allowed to have their own feelings, they often think, okay, I have to be perfect, and then somehow I'll be okay and I'll be acceptable. And we need to learn that we can be acceptable even if, and often for girls, the thing is, we have to accept our girls even when they're mad, right? And not say, that's not ladylike. And we have to accept our boys even when they're scared, and not say, real boys don't cry, or real boys aren't scared, because everyone is scared. In fact, some of my favorite people who've been in the classes, like one guy was in special ops and was really struggling when he came back and had done some stuff, which is why he was in the class, but he was saying, like, you know what? Anyone who says, you know, like, oh yeah, those people, you know, we have courage because we don't get afraid. He said, are you kidding? You're scared to death. And I'm thinking in my head, it's not really courageous to do something that you're not afraid of, right? If something is just really easy for me, it doesn't take courage for me to do it. I just do it, right? Brushing my teeth doesn't take courage. I'm not afraid of brushing my teeth. But taking on a new task, that I'm like, wow, I'm putting myself out there, I'm being vulnerable, right? And the special ops guys are really doing it. It's that ability to have the feeling and make a decision and still do things and contain that feeling well enough by being a thermostat that, like, yeah, I'm having this feeling, how am I going to cope with it, including reaching out for other people. And when kids are empathized with to be self-aware, they also get more emotional intelligence and they develop empathy for other people. That's why kids who are raised by parents who don't know how to do empathy, you know, suck it up, suck it up, buttercup, or whatever the deal is. They often don't know how to empathize with other people. And they're like, I don't want to deal with all that shit. Well, guess what? That's what we're dealing with in relationships. It's not really a relationship without that feeling connection. That's what makes people human, that connection. We're hardwired for it. If we want to pretend we're not, we're missing half the picture. And then people go, yeah, well, I don't think that had anything to do with my addiction. People hate the F word, feelings. Third core value skill is boundaries. This is the ability to protect and contain yourself while remaining connected to others. And there's two dysfunction. One is that your boundaries can be too loose, and one is that they can be too rigid. So some of you have been in my class. When you have the diffuse boundaries, the enmeshed boundaries, where people have too much connection and not enough individuality, because those are those two human poles. We have to balance my need to be an individual, my need to be autonomous, my need to be in control of myself, with the need to have connection. Connection always comes first. That's our first human need, or we die. So people who are too connected and don't have enough individuality and autonomy are like scrambled eggs. You cannot tell where one starts and the other stops, and they're mixing up in other people's problems, and other people are mixing up in their problems. It's like I am, she is, he or we, and we are all together, or whatever that I'm in the Walrus song by the Beatles says. I mean, this is like, and often then they get fed up after a while. They're like, oh my God, I take care of everyone's problems, I do all this, and oh my God, and it never comes back to me. And they'll often flip, and see the two extremes often flip back and forth. And flipping back and forth between two extremes is not the same as balance. We're talking about. So the enmeshed ones are often everybody else is messing in their business, they're messing in everybody else's business. They often get frustrated, and then they'll often flip to the other side, which is the eggs in their shell side. Now these are people who have too rigid of boundaries. They have too much autonomy, too much individuality, not enough connection. So they're just these eggs in their shells. So they're not really connecting, right? And they think, this is great, because you know what, I don't need all that messy stuff of all that. The problem with being an egg in your shell, you get lonely. And you know the Bruce song, everybody has a hungry heart, right? So you get lonely, and you're in your shell. And then at a certain point, you break out of your shell. And if you don't know how to do boundaries, you break out of that shell. Your egg oozes out. It's not a hard-boiled egg, it's just in a shell. That egg oozes out and mixes up with another egg. And at the beginning, it feels wonderful. So this is where the rigid person has switched over to this side for a while. It feels wonderful. Oh my gosh, I'm in love. And even people who are pretty cynical can go through this. I mean, Larry King's been married like, 5 times, that old guy on the TV. And every time it's like, this is the one. This is the one when you realize, if I don't deal with my issues, I may keep trading partners, but I'm not going to solve the problem. So they get all enmeshed, and this is wonderful. And he might be like, oh, she's so spontaneous and all of this stuff, and I just love being with her, and she's brought out parts of me that I never knew existed. But the problem is, if you started as that rigid shell and then you go over here for a while, at some point this part's going to feel like, oh, we're too stuck together. We're smothering. I can't stand it. And then you go back to the rigid shell. So this can be this constant game of going back and forth between too few boundaries and too rigid of boundaries. Neither one of those is healthy. And flipping back and forth, like I said, is not the key to balance. Because what we would like, healthy families, healthy couples, healthy families, healthy relationships look like fried eggs in a pan. So if you think of eggs in a pan that are fried, you can do over easy or sunny side up, whichever you prefer. But when you think about those eggs in a pan, there's areas of connection. The eggs are kind of like, those little edges, yes, those edges, they definitely have some connection, but you can also see each individual egg. You can look and go, oh, there's 5 eggs in that pan. That might be mom, dad, and 3 kids, right? But you can see each egg has its individuality, but at the same time, there's that connection. That's what we're talking about by the healthy balance. And remember, you need that internal boundary. You need that inside, that white peel of the orange, to contain stuff inside of you. Because your stuff shouldn't just be leaking out like, I couldn't help it. I just got mad and I had to say it. I couldn't help it. We should be able to have that inner boundary that keeps what needs to stay in until we decide what to do with it. So it shouldn't just be my anger just spills out, or my, whatever just spills out and just goes all over the place. No, I need that internal boundary to keep in what needs to be in so I can regulate it and decide what to do about it. And then I need that outside of the orange peel to keep out what needs to stay out, right? And that's where I set limits with other people. It might be the word no. I'm going to not do that, or it might be the word yes or whatever. The other example I like is this idea of, instead of having a rigid wall around us, and people, if they've been hurt, often build a rigid wall. They're like, that's it, I'm done with men, or I'm done with women, or I'm never going to have a relationship again. And they built this wall, and again, you get lonely inside. And if other people come to try to get through that wall, the respectful people, you say, nope, 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 nope. The respectful people, what do? They go away. They find other people. What do the people who are not good with boundaries do? They're like wolves waiting outside the wall. Because when you get lonely, boom, crash through the wall. You're like, take the wall down, and then there's the wolves right there, ready to get in a bad relationship. So this is often where you set yourself up for a bad relationship if what you do is just, wall off and then get lonely, and then there's the people outside. So I like the idea of, you're a walled city, you're inside, but your walls need to have windows, screens, screen doors, storm doors, a drawbridge, right? There's all these ways of getting in and out, and you decide, what am I letting in and what am I letting out? So for instance, there might be someone that you've met somewhere, they're an acquaintance. So this person, you peek at them through the peephole, right? Talk to them through that. Maybe you'll open the door and talk to them through the locked storm door. Maybe, it's one like a screen door. Maybe eventually you actually open the door and let them get in closer. Now, some people, we put down the drawbridge and let them right in. Like our kids are often, they have the drawbridge control, right? We let them get right in and close to our hearts. And the thing is, when people are close to us, here's the hard part. When we let people close to us, they touch our hearts most deeply. So we get the most human connection from them. At the same time, though, we're hurt most in those relationships because, again, they're so close to our hearts. So it's that potential, and then we have to have the ability to repair when things go wrong and we hurt each other. And sometimes, this is not just the intentional pain, because we really want to, work on that. That if we're with people who are intentionally hurting us a lot because they're maybe hurt people, we maybe need to look at that and how we draw those boundaries. And maybe I don't let them as close to my heart if they're intentionally hurting me. But unintentional hurts happen, and then how do we heal from that? So that's that boundary one. And boundaries really let people have that balance to where they learn. I can let the good stuff in and keep the bad stuff out, and I'm in charge of my own internal boundary. It isn't that you make me feel a certain way or you make me do certain things. I'm in charge of that. So there's that strength that comes with that. The fourth one, let me check my time here. Nope, we're getting good. I think we can finish all 5 of them. The fourth one is this idea of interdependence. This is one of the core value skills, is interdependence. Interdependence means just what we talked about. You need people and you need to be an individual. So we depend on each other. So it's not the same as dependence or codependence, right? It's not neediness only one way. People need each other. So the skill in interdependence is identifying one's wants and needs, right? Saying, here's what I want and here's what I need. Caring for yourself and letting others care for you appropriately. So obviously kids need a lot of care at the beginning, but after that it's like interdependence says, hey, I'm going to identify my wants and needs. I'm going to be with someone who identifies their wants and needs, and I am going to take care of myself, and I'm going to let you take care of me, and vice versa, because there is a caring back and forth. So this is why it's really contemptuous, when people nowadays like, you do you and I'll do me. That's kind of saying there's no real relationship here. That's pretty selfish. Well, I'm just going to do me and I shouldn't have to worry about your needs because it's all about me, right? So that's really an off-putting thing. And again, it's often one of those walls. It's like there's hurt and then it's like, well, I'll just do that. And it's really, when you think about it, that's like the little kid saying, I'm going to take my marbles and go home. That's that kind of reactive, defensive thing going on with that. So, the dysfunctional part, if you don't learn this interdependence thing well, some people get over-dependent. And again, this isn't always a gender thing, because sometimes people think, oh, well, women are all dependent and men aren't. And it's not really a gender thing. So a lot of times women have been trained to kind of emotionally give and give and give. And men have been taught, well, I don't have to really give back or whatever, so it may work that way. On the other hand, there are men who are very emotional, and the women are the cold one. It's probably a 75-25 split on that. Women probably do have more dependence, and part of that's, because of economic stuff and being the ones to raise the kids and all that stuff too. But there's been certain cultural messages around that. Then there's people who are anti-dependent. So over-dependence, not good. Anti-dependence, not good. Like, I don't need anyone. Well, actually, we all need people. Again, hardwired for it. Even people in solitary dream about people. Even the Unabomber had people. And when you think about it, that's why solitary is considered such a tough thing, because people are not meant to be, anti-dependent. So a child should be taught how to do what he or she can do for themselves, and how to lean on others and ask for help when they need it. So that's what the whole definition of interdependent is. I can be connected and still be an individual. I can do what I need to do, because you don't want a little brat who's like, I can't do anything, right? Don't do for kids what they can do for themselves, because then you rob them of that chance to make effort and grow their self-esteem and their resilience. So we need to do that with ourselves too. Sometimes you need to haul your little ass up to the plate and say, guess what? It's not enough to want to change. I got to do the work to change. I got to put in the effort. Then you get the reward though, like, I did that. It was hard work, and I did it. And she or he who refuses to be taught is exhibiting arrogance and pridefulness. So remember, there are teachers everywhere. Your kids might be your teachers. So maybe something keeps coming up with you and your kid, and instead of using that as, what a bratty kid I have, you're like, is there something I need to learn from this thing? The ability to accept teaching demonstrates genuine pride, and also that thing we call in here humility. Because, people often in here talk about, well, I don't want to be prideful. It's like, there's a difference between genuine pride, that's the part that also has that humbleness and that humility. So the ability to be a teacher. So you can teach and you can be taught, right? And I know a lot of bosses say, I don't want someone who can't be taught, Now, the last one, we'll talk about pseudo-intimacy when we talk about relationships. I have a list of those, so I'll make myself a note to talk about those when we get into relationships, because I want to get to the fifth one, so we finish up this little series on these core self skills. And this is one called moderation or regulation. And this is experiencing and expressing oneself moderately from that regulated place. Remember the thermostat temperature thing? See, thermometers just take the temperature of what's ever around them. So if everything's kind of jazzed up, they're jazzed up. And if everything's kind of cold, they're cold. They're chameleonic, right? Instead of, if you're the thermostat with your emotions, and you can regulate your emotions, no matter what's going on around you, you decide, oh, I'm getting a little hot here, cool it down. Oh, I'm a little lacking energy, I gotta, do it up. So that's that thing, and you can do it in moderation. Now, people who are immature, they tend to be too loose with their expressiveness. And what that means is they'll often just kind of, one guy, Terry Real, calls it like, the vomit approach to things, just, that's just how I feel, so I'm going to get it out to you. And now, they often don't want to hear other people's side, but it's like, he calls it that vomit approach to it. That's often a sign of immaturity. Kids will often just, with their feelings, and we teach them like, there's times and places to say it, there's ways to say it, there's all those kinds of things. That's that part that we mean by moderation. Now, some people are what we call super mature, right? And a lot of times if people were raised to be little adults, right, they were kind of the kids in the family who were taking care of the parents or whatever, it's that they're too tightly wound, right? That they can't ever really let go. They're like, everything's so modulated. And I'm thinking there's a show on called The Handmaid's Tale, and boy, you watch those people and everyone's just so super modulated and keeping it in and all of that, and you just know this is going to reach an explosive end, right? I've read the book 35 years ago or whatever it was, but that's that other side. And what you want is the ability to do both. That, I'm going to have and share my emotions, but I'm going to do it in a regulated way, a moderated way. I'm not just going to, everything's just going to fall out of my mouth. Sometimes people are oversharers. I've talked about that one friend I had who was really an oversharer. She'd be telling people in the line of Target some stuff, and I'm like, they don't really need to hear about that. That's a little oversharing. She said, my sister who's a therapist said the same thing, right? So that's that thing. And this is what, when we help children, that's when we say to 2-year-olds, use your words and not your fists, right? So if they're mad, we're like, I know you're mad. I know you are. You really want that toy, right? And we don't hit our sister, right? We don't hit our brother or whatever. So we're teaching kids at that point, I can have my feeling and decide what to do with it. And that teaches that modulation. And that really helps people be emotionally intelligent in relationships. And that's what we want, is kids who can be emotionally intelligent both with themselves and ourselves be. And when I say kids, I'm not like, oh, are we talking about parenting? We are talking about parenting, but we're also looking at how you were parented. And if you're like, but I didn't get that, Darla, well, guess what? Then that's your goal. How do I grow myself up now? Because now I'm an adult and I can parent the little kid inside of me. I can sometimes have to draw limits with that kid and say, you know what? No, you don't get to throw a fit over this. Not okay. You can be mad. How are you going to deal with it? It's kind of like we talk about who's driving your bus. That analogy, you want the adult driving the bus. You can have all the little kids on the bus. You're going to have your 2-year-old on the bus and your 3-year-old. And I don't mean your kids. I mean your inner 2-year-old, your inner 3-year-old, your inner 14-year-old. They're going to be on the bus. And you're going, I'm listening. I'll take that into account. But you don't turn the wheel of the bus over to them. Because if you turn the wheel of the bus over to your 2-year-old, and off the road, right? That bus is going to go crazy. So what we want is for that adult to be driving the bus. So 5 tasks. Let's just go through them really quickly again before we end this one. And that is, these are the 5 core self skills. 1, self-esteem. 2, self-awareness. 3, boundaries. 4, interdependence. And 5, modulation, moderation, or regulation. So that was a quick thing into that. We'll be looking at these more again when we talk about relationships. And thanks for joining me. Talk to you soon.